The death of Micah Miller, it's something we've been talking about throughout the year. It was a suicide that happened in April of this year. She was the wife of John Paul Miller, a pastor at a local church in South Carolina. No shortage of controversy around this family either. Micah and John Paul, the relationship, a result of an affair with a babysitter. Micah was the babysitter, also the wife of his best friend, and he's a pastor. So, already starting off on a good foot. Uh, but obviously, at the end of the day, something happened here that made Micah decide to take her life in April of 2024. I'm not even arguing it was a suicide because I believe it clearly was. But what drove her to that, and coercive control, if that drove her to it? Siobhan Scott, psychotherapist and author, joining us. Can someone, I guess I shouldn't even say can someone, if someone had coercively controlled someone, put someone in such a horrible mental state that they felt their best way out of that was to end their life, can they be charged with murder?
That's a really interesting legal question because, yeah, I'm trying to think how to frame that.
Hmm.
I can't say I've ever seen a case where that's happened.
Hmm.
You can certainly, I think, from a moral point of view, look at someone's behavior and say that, yeah, criminal stalking, incredibly awful things that people do, the ways that people can abuse each other. But can someone else be criminally liable for someone else's suicide? I believe there have been cases where it was a direct, you need to kill yourself now to a
Hmm.
very fragile person, where there was criminal liability found for that. But just being in a toxic relationship
Yeah.
where someone ends their life, I have never seen that happen. So that'll be interesting to see what develops here.
Yeah. It's a very interesting question because, again, I do not think Pastor John Paul went out and murdered
Right.
Micah Miller. I do not at all. Uh, but it certainly seems like a very tumultuous relationship from the evidence that we've seen, her own writings, her own videos, things that she told her family. It looked like a pretty damaging relationship. On the other side, John Paul is claiming, look, she had all these mental health problems, and I was just trying to be the buffer and to be the bumper for her as she acted out and went through all of this. That's his argument on his side. She's dead. So how difficult is it post mortem to take a look at this and go, who's telling the truth here? Or is it kind of a mix, maybe in a gray area where maybe there's a little bit of truth all over the place?
Yeah, and he has acknowledged his own mental health problems. I believe he said
Yeah.
publicly he had bipolar
Hmm.
disorder and was on all kinds of medication. So this is a guy with red flag after red flag. And as you said, his sexual behavior, the fact that he had slashed his wife's tires, put tracking devices on her cars. I mean, I think it's a big mess of
Yeah.
gray area. And did she have some pre-existing problems? Quite possibly. That's not a crime. A lot
Yeah.
of people have some mental health problems. But you put two people like that together, and you often get very bad things happening.
I would play the devil's advocate here, and just for a second. I mean, I think John Paul is a very bizarre individual, just from his interviews that I've seen. Seemingly very narcissistic, very self-aggrandizing. I think that's not really up for debate. But in some cases like this, are we too quick to go down the route of the partner is the one who is to blame here, versus the partner was actually really trying to help them, but they had such delusional thinking that it came across as if they were being abused, but maybe they weren't. But it was just kind of the way that that thought process was going on. I don't know.
No, I think that's a really incredible point because for some people, they I'm trying to think how to not get too psychobabbly with all this, but
Yeah.
but some people will misperceive reality,
Hmm.
and they will perceive that people are doing things to them with ill intent when they're not.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes they are some of the time. And so it gets really, really murky. And you see this with couples who are, let's say, going through child custody evaluation sometimes, and there's been bad behavior everywhere.
Hmm.
And when you put both pieces of the pie together and you're trying to sort out who did what and when did it start, and I mean, you just never really get it completely clear.
Hmm.
But you can say there are people who just need to get away from each other and
Hmm.
do better when they're not together. And that, sometimes is the best you can do.
Well, and I would say probably some people are just best to be with no one, until they
Yes.
have their own mental health together. And John Paul, maybe is one of those individuals,
Yeah.
judging from where he's
Yeah.
all over the board, as we've seen in some of the interviews with News Nation and such. Just, yeah, I mean, I don't even, he's an interesting one. It's hard to grasp his thought process, or because it just seems to be flying out all over the place.
Yeah, I would stick my neck out and say John Paul needs to stay out of relationships. I
Yeah.
I would definitely say that. There's just way too many red flags going on with the guy's behavior.
Yeah, well, with the FBI investigation that's continuing on, very likely into financial issues, it probably won't be much of an issue for him because I'm kind of doubting he's going to be a free man for very much longer if those financial crimes, if in fact they are alleged, come to light. It's not going to look very good, and there's already a lot of things there. Very bizarre case, and one that, yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around.
Hmm.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Bruschi, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.